Remember last year's amazing trip? That cute first birthday party? All those photos, all those memories can be freed from your phone with a Shutterfly photo book. Rediscover and share your favorite moments with those you love. You'll be amazed how easy it is to make a photo book with Shutterfly and enjoy it for years to come. Get 40% off orders over $29 with code POD40 at Shutterfly.com and make something that means something.
I just love these films where people are just friends and just hanging out with each other, taking a piss out of each other. Their lives might split in different ways. It's like that kind of hangout vibe film, which is just so beautiful, which I don't think you see that much nowadays. And it looks great still. Even the train scene with the kind of rear projection where they're running away from the train, they're still like, fucking hell, are they going to get away? Wow, yeah, I think spectacular. Spectacular.
Apparently it's one of Netflix's most liked. When you like on its menu, it goes up there saying most liked. Hello everyone, joining Flixwatcher today we have Josh.
Hello.
Becky.
Hello.
And Kobe.
Heya.
And we're here to talk about Stand By Me.
Thank you as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes that you can hear right now. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for editing. Please do remember to head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts to give us a 5-star rating and a glowing review. If you want to join the conversation with us, go to Twitter. I'm not going to say the alternative name there. We are at FlixWatcherPod or Instagram at FlixWatcher.
Hello film fans, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher. Our guests today are Becky and Josh. Over to you please, Becky, to say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Becky Darke. I am a podcaster and writer and presenter. I mainly specialise in horror and kind of 90s nostalgia stuff. And you can find me at Games Radar, at the Arrow video blog, over at Evolution of Horror with Mike Munzer, where we do lots of podcasting and like events together. And I've got a couple of my own podcasts. So I do Don't Point That Horror at Me with my best friend Jill Nolan, where we look back at the very silly 90s teen horror paperbacks, point horror books.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I love them so much.
And Josh is here as well, and we did a podcast together about the 90s kids show Eerie, Indiana, which sadly is only 19 episodes long, so our podcast always had a shelf life, but we got the opportunity to talk to loads of creators from the show. We've done live event and stuff around that as well, so yeah, lots going on.
And who are you, sir?
Who am I? Well, I could make a musical theatre reference and say I'm Jean Valjean.
24601.
Which segues nicely into the fact that I'm an actor and I trained in musical theatre, so that's sort of where my career started, doing musicals. But it's really been over the last few years that I've started doing more screen work. So I last year starred and co-wrote The Latent Image, which is a film, an independent horror film that I'd been working on for about 5 years. And so that's been really cool to finally get that out there. I've got another horror movie, which is really exciting, coming out this year. And yeah, as Becky said, we did the Eerie, Indiana podcast together. I'm a contributor on the Evolution of Horror podcast, Brain Rot, various other things. We're a nice little sort of horror community in London, which is great, which is how we all sort of know each other. And yeah, and you know, you can find me on social media talking about Britney Spears and Mariah Carey and Scream and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which is the same 4 things that I've loved since I was 10 years old.
I feel slightly... I said 24601 there, and you completely dismissed my reference there to Jean Valjean. Anyway, that's just me thinking I'm going to have to deal with that this evening. Guys, talking about point horror, I read a few of those books, but they were when I was a kid in the 90s, it was like everywhere, more than Stephen King even. So honestly, the Goosebumps is making its way to small and big screen. What's happened to point horror? Should some of those books come to life?
I think they're still available, aren't they? You could definitely buy them on eBay.
No, but I mean on TV and video, TV and film.
So there was supposed to be a show on HBO Max that Jill, my co-host, and I were kind of keeping close eyes on. And I don't think it ever quite came to fruition. It might still be in the works. I don't think we ever saw it. So I think it's something that has kind of... Because we've had things like Fear Street on Netflix, which is obviously based on R.L. Stine books. We've had things like The Midnight Club, which was adapted by Mike Flanagan. So, yeah, I think that there is a gaping hole where point horror TV should be.
People love the 90s as well, so
yeah,
easy moneymaker there.
Think how good the soundtrack would be.
It is. I think the 90s is rife for remaking for sure. I do think it's quite tricky though, because similarly with horror comedies, sort of YA horror, it's really difficult to sort of strike that balance. And I think sort of back in the 90s, what those kind of shows were riffing on was, like Eerie Indiana did, was riffing on things from sort of classic horror, sort of Hammer horror even, stuff pre-60s, whereas I think what these reboots are doing is very much riffing on the 90s, so it becomes like a remake of a remake of a remake a little bit, and it can get a little bit lost in what it's trying to do. And then they try and make it a bit more serious and a bit more mature. When you look back at something like Goosebumps, and while they're authentic, the characters are, there's still a level of fun and there's like bright colors, and it is still definitely geared towards children. And I think they're trying to hit those 4 quadrants or whatever with these new versions, and I don't think they work quite as well because of that.
Well, we're going to be talking about a short story from one of the most prolific horror writers, Stand By Me. Josh, this is your choice. Can you tell us first of all why you chose it, and then you've got 60 seconds to tell us the synopsis.
On the clock, yeah. Okay, so I chose Stand By Me because, I so often go on podcasts to talk specifically about horror, and when I do, it's usually going to be something from the 90s. It's going to be Scream, it's going to be The Faculty, I Know What You Did Last Summer, all of those kind of things. But there's another side to my taste and things that I love that isn't necessarily horror, and sort of coming-of-age movies and teen movies are definitely in that. And Stand By Me's been one of my favorite films since I was a teenager. I saw it when I was 14, 15, and I've loved it. I found it really relatable. I love all the actors in it. I love the style. And I was a big Stephen King fan as well growing up. And so I read the novella that it's based on.
Oh, so The Body, is it?
It's called The Body, yeah. And, completely fell in love. So, yeah, this is just a lovely opportunity for me to talk about one of my favourite films ever.
And the synopsis timer starts now.
Let's do it. Okay, so Stand By Me. Stand By Me is a coming-of-age drama. It's directed by Rob Reiner, and it's based on Stephen King's novella The Body, which is part of like a 4-part book called Different Seasons. It's named after the Ben E. King song of the same name. And it's set in the fictional town of Castle Rock, in which 4 best friends decide to take a journey down the railroad tracks to find the body of a young boy that's been killed, allegedly being hit by a train. And as they go on this journey to find the body, they find themselves along the way.
Perfect. Becky, have you seen this before?
Yeah. God, yeah. Of course. This is one of those films that when you ask people, what are your top 5, top 10, top 20 favourite films, Stand By Me just comes up time and time again. Like, this is an all-time classic. Rob Reiner, part of his unbelievable run he had as a director. And it's just an absolute stone cold classic. So yeah, I have seen this countless times, but I hadn't seen it in a little while before I rewatched it for this chat. So it was really, really lovely to revisit this story and these characters.
Helen.
Yeah, so I have seen it before, but I didn't watch it until I was maybe in my 20s. So my relationship with it is very, very different, I think, to people who've seen it when they're much, much younger and more close to the age of the kids in it. It's one of those films that every time you watch it, you're like, oh, that's such and such when they were little,
yeah.
and now they're all grown up, and I've seen them in this. And yeah, there's like a few. There's loads of scenes in there that like really, really stand with you. And I think the pie eating scene is one that is just really, really, really vivid. And I imagine as a teenage boy, it's just one of those hilarious things. And then the leeches scene as well is just one of those scenes that you just can't shake. But yeah, it's got a great cast, and it's, you know, it's Stephen King at his peak. And yeah, it's just kind of like a classic 80s movie that has all those kind of like classic nostalgia 80s moments, but set in the 60s. So it's got nostalgia for a different kind of time as well.
So this, you talk about Rob Reiner here, Becky, but this is a song that we've been missing from our Rob Reiner triptych. So we've had that When Harry Met Sally, which is, as this is recorded, is officially our joint top film on Flixwatcher ever. We've also had The Princess Bride, and then preceding those two is Stand By Me, and this now completes that classic run of what a lot of people, well, then when it goes into Misery and then A Few Good Men, but often people talk about these three films standing out as like denouement of his 80s peak. When did Spinal Tap come out? That was that was a bit earlier. That was early 80s as well, wasn't it? But I think
that was just before, yeah.
Yeah, that stands slightly to the side for me for Rob Reiner stuff. But yeah, wow, what a run for a director.
Yeah, he's such an underrated director as well, I think. To have this run of films that are so iconic and so well known. He's not really spoken in the same breath as someone like Steven Spielberg, but I think absolutely should be.
Well, in terms of how he's shaped young people's lives and...
Yeah, I think so. But also, like, you know, you look at those films and there's a variety there. There's an eclectic mix, you know, to go from Stand By Me to Misery. I mean, they're both Stephen King, but they're both very different. And then throwing The Princess Bride and When Harry Met Sally, you've got this iconic fantasy movie that was so formative for so many young people. And then When Harry Met Sally, which is like one of the most definitive rom-coms of all time. You like, what are we doing? Like, this is amazing. You can only dream of having a selection of films. Could retire after it, you know?
So I'm a mix of both Helen and Becky in this, and I didn't see it until a bit later in life, and I can tell you why. Because it was always on TV in the late 80s, and always preceded by, let's go and see a dead body. And as a kid, I was like, I don't want to see that.
I don't want to see that.
And I don't know when I saw it. I must have been like, I'm sure I was like 18 or so. But when I did see it, I was like, fuck, been missing out so long. And to this day, that dead body reveals still does kind of freak me out, because I'm like, this is the thing that stopped me watching it for like a decade at least when I was younger. But again, like Becky, I've not seen it for a minute. It must have been best part of 2 decades, if not more, having not seen it. And the amount of people that crop up in it that I completely forgotten about, the biggest being John Cusack. I was like, what? John Cusack's in this? What's going on? I can't think straight anymore. Kiefer Sutherland, I don't remember him being in it. But it's just all... So the cast that is amassed here, young actors, some of whom have gone to obviously bigger things, some have, you know, been more tragic, but it's just great seeing that side of things. But also, I just love these films where people are just friends and just hanging out with each other, taking a piss out of each other. Their lives might split in different ways. Like this is why like Dazed and Confused, one of my favorite films. I just like that kind of hangout vibe film, which is just so beautiful. Which I don't think you see that much nowadays. But that's I just like the vibe of hanging out with these guys. Some always taking a piss out of each other. Some more friends than others. Some with backstories which are more tragic than others. But they're kind of bound together by some kind of force that kidulthood has that keeps people together for some reasons. And then, you know, adulthood takes over and then they split apart. And it's those friends that you have when you're younger that you don't see later on in life. And it's just, that's what I love when I rewatch films like this. And it looks great still. Even the train scene with the kind of rear projection where they're running away from the train, they're still like, fucking hell, are they going to get away? Wow, yeah, I think spectacular. Spectacular.
Mm-hmm. Apparently it's it's one of Netflix's most liked. When you like on its menu, it goes up there saying,
I believe it.
Most liked.
It doesn't pull its punches.
No.
You know, it aesthetically, it's got this very sort of late 50s, early 60s haze to it, which feels very nostalgic, and maybe even nostalgic in a way where things didn't even really look that way, but it gives you that sort of the warm fuzzies. But the way the kids talk to each other and then the things that they're having to deal with aren't nice. They're dealing with bullying, and they're dealing with violence, and they're dealing with death and loss. And then, like, the kids themselves as well. Yes, it's very much a product of his time, but there's F-bombs thrown around, and there's so much fat shaming in the movie. But I feel like that just gives the film a sense of danger, that if that stuff wasn't there, the film would just be very twee and very forgettable. One of the things that always stands out at me is when Wil Wheaton's character Gordie says to them, they get sort of halfway through, that we're here to find a dead body. This shouldn't be a party. And I think that always stays with me, because you start to see them maturing, and that this isn't necessarily going to be the fun ride that it maybe starts out as.
I think what struck me more this watch was how tough Gordie's dad is on him, because he wasn't living up to the butchness of his all-star bigger brother kind of thing. And that's what I love about films like this, when you rewatch them and you take different things from each time. And I don't remember that being a factor so much. I just remember it being like, it's a bit of a dick, but obviously he's hurting as well in different ways. And Gordie's trying to live up to this this spectre that he can never live up to in his brother, who happens just to be one of the coolest dudes ever, really kind, but also like, hey, I can play football as well in a place where playing football is probably one of the biggest things you can ever do. And the last thing I want to say is what I love about 80s films in particular is how kids can just go anywhere they fucking want to. For as long as they want to.
For days.
No mobile phones, just running off to find dead bodies. And
was it even the contrivance of like, you just tell your mum I'm at your house, and that kind of was it
round robin, yeah.
Yeah.
That's when I'm fucking off. See you later.
Classic. A coming of age staple, which by the time I was going out and doing things like that, we did have phones, and so that just wasn't going to be something that we could do anymore. But yeah, just going back on something that you said, Kobe, John Cusack's character, the older brother, oh my goodness, just watching him. I am an older brother, and I remember wishing I had a big brother and one that was like him, but that also feeling bad that I wasn't quite the big brother that he is in that movie for my younger brother. And I just love all those. I'm not a big fan of flashbacks normally, but I love the flashbacks in this film. And there's just sort of a real warm yet tragic, ghostly presence that I think John Cusack brings. The chemistry is just firing on all cylinders from all the actors, but particularly in those scenes with him and with Wil Wheaton, I think it's really beautiful.
Anything else you want to say, guys, before we head to the scores?
I was going to ask, just out of curiosity, the ending is like really sad, but is there kind of their little journey is coming to the end because of what you've seen? You're like, these guys aren't going to stay friends, they're going to drift apart. And it's kind of like that sweet sadness and the realization that they've had this kind of magical time, but it's not going to last. Like, are you still friends with anyone that you hung out with when you were 12?
Yeah, lots of...
One. I've got one, and we both love this film. I actually messaged him while I was watching it and was like voice noting him little bits as we do it. And we're very connected by his name's also Josh, but we're very connected by this film. But that being said, I don't have many friendships quite like that. And especially for me personally, like, age 12, that's right in, you're hitting puberty, and sexuality was a big thing that was always on my mind. Like, I knew I was gay from around that age. And so I actually didn't have a group of 4 boys like that. And so there's something about this film that
pulls you into that grouping.
Is almost like it was just out of reach. It was something that I always wanted, and I think that's why I connect to the film so much. And then you add the sort of metatextual element of River Phoenix actually dying, and so you see his character fade away at the end. I think adds another layer to it, that it's just so much more emotional. I've actually been to the Viper Room where he died. I've been there a couple of times. Yeah, it was on Halloween in 1993 when it happened, and I've been there a couple of times on Halloween, and they still put flowers out and things like that. Like, it was quite cool to visit that spot, particularly because he's always been such a favorite actor of mine, and in fact all of the actors in this film for me as an actor have always been incredibly inspiring. but him particularly, yeah, for sure. So yeah, this film means a lot to me on a lot of different levels. But yeah, going back to that, Helen, the sort of bittersweet nature of friendship, it does capture that sort of fleeting moment, and I find that very relatable.
And there's a real kind of earnestness to this film. You know, it's got a lot of those set pieces that you were referring to, Helen, but there's so much that stands out to me that is so kind of anchored in the friendship and the relationships between these boys. You know, they're 12, maybe just before, you know, they're sort of still young enough that they're not embarrassed to cry in front of each other or touch each other and things like that. And what I think the film does so beautifully is it has that earnestness, but never to the point that it kind of feels sickly or kind
it's
of
never saccharine, is it?
Absolute, no, exactly. And those interactions between Chris and Gordie, or when Corey Feldman's character gets upset about the junkyard man kind of like ragging on his dad and stuff. Gordie is sad because his brother's died, and Chris is sad because, you know, he doesn't feel like he's ever going to get out of this town, and that, you know, people kind of think badly about him and about his family. He's got a tough relationship with his dad.
And Vern can't find his pennies.
Yeah, and Vern can't find his pennies. But again, like, there's this childishness to it, you know, with the pennies thing. There's treasure maps and things like this. And there's almost some, without quite the sort of broad comedy camp elements, but it's got similarities to films like The Goonies, where you've got those interactions between characters and this kind of quest and these childish things that they are kind of hanging on to, but on the cusp of adulthood. And, you know, you asked the question, Helen, about sort of still having friends from back then, and I've still got some friends from back then. And, you know, it's so funny with movies. Josh, you talk about you having this connection with your friend Josh about Stand By Me. Like, for me and my friends, it's things like Hocus Pocus and The Craft and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, these films that we used to watch like at sleepovers. All bangers all the time. But we used to watch them at sleepovers, and they're all films that in one way or another kind of deal with childhood and adolescence and coming of age and kind of discovering yourself. And I think it's really fitting that if you think about the friendships that you had like pre-teen, early teen, that these kinds of coming of age films kind of still loom so large. And I really love that.
It's electric, like that energy, I think, that you talk about, that sort of fleeting on the cusp of something. I think the film captures it really well. And even at the very end, right before they find the body, you know, there's a literal storm brewing. The wind is picking up as they're about to, their lives are going to be changed forever because of this one moment. And I love that. And I love the intensity of that. And then on the flip side, you've got all these banging one-liners, and the use of music in the film is so fun. They're always singing and chanting and doing different things.
Slagging off each other's mums.
Yeah. And then she goes around the corner and licks it up. Yeah, it's so good. So it balances it out really, really nicely. So it is really earnest, and yet there's this like, it's kind of like gross boy humor in it as well, which I think is great.
And the direction's so amazing. Like, you really kind of get this feeling of these boys in this landscape, and like there are shots of them sort of before they like run out into the field, or when they are looking down these train tracks, or when they are going over the bridge, this feeling of them being like small within the world. And it's almost kind of like you feel that they are vulnerable in this moment, but also at the same time that it's kind of like the world is like waiting for them to kind of like come into it and kind of like come into their own in the world. And like Rob Reiner's use of kind of space and landscape, and like some of those shots just capture that so beautifully without you having to have it kind of like fed to you on a plate. It's gorgeous.
Helen, do you have many of your friends left from when you were 12?
I mean, like, I'm connected in the way that, like, you add them on Facebook at some point, but I haven't seen them or had a conversation. But then we didn't watch Stand By Me when we were 12 years old together, so maybe that is the bonding glue.
What were you watching when you were 12 years old?
But I think it was probably My Girl. That was the big one for crying. No spoilers.
Yes, very much so.
Well, not a big one for
see
crying
without
for me, but I
glasses.
think it's Wayne's World was the one that we used to watch.
Oh yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, brilliant.
My girl at the cinema, Wayne's World, was the one on the VHS because obviously we wouldn't have been allowed to go to the cinema to watch that one.
Let's head to the scores.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. You'll get 5 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Plus, enjoy access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with the welcome offer of 150,000 points, your business can soar to all new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum, built for business by American Express.
I'm Sam Clements, host of the 90 Minutes or Less Film Festival, another podcast in the Stripped Media family, a podcast that celebrates movies under 90 minutes long. Each episode, I'm joined by a special guest who selects a movie to join our prestigious lineup. Past guests have included fellow Stripped Media family members Martin and Sam from Song by Song, and Kobe from Flixwatcher, and Dave from The Wire Stripped. Search for us now on the app you're currently listening to this podcast, or join us at 90minfilmfest.com.
Welcome to our Flixwatcher scores. They are always out of 5. You can have decimal places if you wish, and we will start with you, please, Josh, with your recommendability.
5. If you've not seen it, I would definitely recommend seeing it. I think most people have, but the beauty of this film is I think it is universal. And so generation after generation, I think, can enjoy it. I think it's held up really well because it's a film that is a period film. So there's elements of the 80s in there, but because it's set in the late 50s, it doesn't feel like those 80s elements have dated it particularly. And then if you like films, there's just so much history and backstory about the actors, their journey, and their connection to each other and the film that they made. So yeah, big 5 stars.
Becky.
Have to give it a 5, absolutely. Like, you know, we've talked so much about kind of like when we watched it as a 4, and whether that is watching it when you're a kid or in your 20s, or I even think if you're slightly older and you're discovering it for the first time, although like Josh says, like I think most people have probably seen this by now, but it's got that like weight of nostalgia, and I think everybody can remember what it was like to be 12, and whether you had like a happy childhood or you were going off on kind of exciting adventures and stuff, like there will have been somebody in your life, hopefully, that you kind of connected with on this kind of level that you can sort of look back on fondly. And I think just cinematically, it's up there with everybody's, like so many people's favourite film for a reason. You know, it's Rob Reiner at the absolute height of his talents. And yeah, it's just got so much going for it.
Helen.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4.5. I think for me, it's not one of my favourites, but I know why people love it like they do. And I think that's just when I kind of caught it. But I think it's one of those films that it's all child actors and that people can kind of be put off with that. But I think this is kind of one of those rare occasions where all of the kids are really, really good. They're like, it's still really, really good. And you're like, oh yeah, I can see how like, this is probably like some of the best performances for some of them, because you look now like Jerry O'Connell obviously went on, did like some other stuff, but never really kind of hit the same kind of level here. So yeah, it's one of those that manages to be about a specific time, but also really timeless as well.
I mean, Jerry O'Connell's, I think looking at him, has he probably done the most? He's
probably the most successful, I'd say.
Yeah. Unknowingly.
As an adult. Yeah.
Maybe I just remember him from Joe's apartment too much, and I've just kind of like blocked out the other films that he's done.
He's probably one of the 4, I think, that while he is fantastic, he's probably giving his career isn't as defined by this role. I think one, because he doesn't quite look the same.
Yeah, that's so true. He's had such a transformation.
Well, it's what happens a lot when you're 12.
And also, I don't think he's not given the material where you think, ooh, like this is his greatest performance. I think there's more things that he's been able to do. I remember him from Sliders and Scream 2. Mm-hmm. That's where I knew him and didn't think of him first before this film.
I had one of those, like, it's one of those absolute classic examples where I used to watch Stand By Me so much and then became this huge, like, Scream 2 fan and never connected the
Put
two.
the two together, yeah.
And then, like, realised one of those things where I was like, I was today years old when I realised, you know, blah, 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 blah. Because
it was like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he's such a... like
prolific, isn't he?
He's very different now to how he was when he was a kid, where somebody like Wil Wheaton, for example, who then went on to have such a successful career in Star Trek The Next Generation, in that he wasn't that much older. So I feel like with Jerry O'Connell, you kind of had this huge jump from him being the kid to him being like this adult actor. Wil Wheaton had almost like that stepping stone where he was still this young kid in Star Trek. And it was so funny. My husband and I watch a lot of Star Trek. We're big fans. And I went upstairs earlier just after I'd watched the film. I was like, oh, I've just finished watching Stand By Me. And his reaction was just immediately, shut up, Wesley.
Brilliant.
So, Helen, you said 4.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go for slightly low because I can understand wholeheartedly why this was people's favourite films. It's not mine. It probably doesn't touch my top 20, but it just is. And I think it's probably because I did wait 8 more years and I maybe should have done to watch it and then for it to be one of the favourite things ever. But I wholeheartedly say, yeah, if you've not seen it, what the hell are you playing at? Go and watch it. Repeat viewing score. Becky.
5. It's got to be. Like,
yeah.
I've seen this so many times, And even though I said, you know, it's been a while since I last watched it, in that first kind of, you know, watching stint, I watched it like so regularly. So yeah, I mean, even now watching it for this, I was just transported back. Josh mentioned earlier, like the amazing one-liners, the performances are great. It looks fantastic. Rob Reiner's direction is amazing. The music's incredible. Yeah, I've seen it so many times. So rewatchability has got to be 5.
Sorry, that should have been to Josh first, but anyway, Josh, your turn.
It's funny, I was going to give it a 4.5 rewatchability because I was going to take other people's thoughts. But no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give it 5. And I think it's just for all the reasons Becky just said. It's one of those films that's an easy rewatch that you can just throw it on and you're going to be engaged regardless. And if you're not, it doesn't matter, because if you're throwing it on, you probably watched it and you know it well enough to sort of love it. And I think the best way to rewatch the film is with people that you have a connection to. You know, even if you're not watching it with them, I love sending people messages and quotes and clips and GIFs and things while I'm watching along, because it feels like it's still this communal thing. And so, yeah, 5.
Helen.
This is maybe only like the second or third time I've seen it, probably. I remember watching it because a friend told me, like, she was like, you really need to watch this. She was very much like, you know, this is amazing. Like, we watched it all the time when we were kids. And then maybe I had it on VHS, but didn't really watch it much. And then, yeah, it just like, it's one of those ones that kind of popped up on Netflix. I was like, oh yeah, maybe, you know, I could watch it again. And it's never really been something I've gone back to. So I think for me, I'm going to go with a 3. I enjoyed rewatching it for this, but I think my probably equivalent to this is maybe like E.T. I mean, that is one that is from a little bit earlier, but it's got that kind of vibe. So I think E.T. feeling would be a 5, and this for me is just a 3.
I'm going to go for, I don't know, maybe we should just go for a 5, because I can't.
Do it. Go on.
I'm going to go for, I'll go. Do it. All that peer pressure. Yeah, I think I'm going to go for a 5 because it's a classic. It's easy to rewatch. Is an important factor, I think, with this film.
Under 90 minutes as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think the thing that I was most surprised on this rewatch was how short it was. I don't know why, but in my head, it felt probably because
feels more epic in a way.
The length of the journey that the boys do and the way that Reiner kind of builds that kind of epicness of this journey that they go on. I thought it was going to run for like 2.5 hours, and it's not. It's 89 minutes. It's beautiful.
It's under 5 minutes, because I clocked it this time because I had a similar thought, and it's under 5 minutes where they reveal that there's a body. You want to go see a dead body? He says that at like 4 minutes 30 or something.
Wow, yeah.
Like the
they
setup
really get
is
on
boom,
with it.
Done. They do, yeah. And you already know who all these 4 boys are straight away. Like, it's so immediate. It's very well written.
Small screen score, Josh.
I'd give it a 4. I'd deduct a point just because it's old and people have no attention spans, and when things aren't flashy and bright and in their face, I think, you know, it can get lost in the mix a little bit. It's a talky movie. There's not much action. And by that, I mean, there's not a lot of sort of modern, you know, Marvel-esque action, shall we say. There's not a lot of quick cuts.
There's no spaceships landing with...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. One thing I wanted to say before is that Rob Reiner actually does a lot of things with the 4 of them in one take, where they're saying lots of things and really having these emotional moments all in one shot, which is a testament to the quality of the acting, because what they're feeling is really authentic. But for something on the small screen, you know, you're looking back, we're in the same shot, we're in the same frame. I think maybe that wouldn't hold modern audiences' attentions. So I'm going to deduct a point for that. So 4.
Becky?
I'm going to go 4 as well, for a slightly different reason. I just think because a lot of that kind of like sweeping landscape stuff, you know, we're lucky nowadays where if you're watching it on our TVs, we've all got pretty big screens and with decent definition and stuff on them. So it still looks great. But I've never seen this on the big screen, and I would love to, because I would love to see those sort of big open vistas and those set pieces played out on big screens. So yeah, a 4.
Helen?
Yeah, I mean, this feels like a Prince Charles cinema probably have it fairly regularly.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I reckon
I
it's
bet.
one of
Very that.
those. And you can go along and scream at the pie scene and sing along to the song at the end. Yeah, I think because it's like 80s and I've only ever watched it like on VHS vibes, that it's that kind of like homey TV vibe for me. So I probably wouldn't be swayed to go and see it at the cinema. So I'm going to give it a 5 for its small screen.
I'm going to go for 4.5. The first time I'd definitely remember seeing it, it would have been on the 14-inch TV that now would have weighed like the size of a small house, essentially. That took to university with me, and was happy with it then. But as Becky's saying, I think it'd be great to see this in, not necessarily for the visuals for me, but I think seeing with other people who love the film in the cinema, hence the Prince Charles kind of aspect, would pull me into it. So it's just losing 0.5 because I think, you know, Prince Charles viewing, if I had some time, yeah, definitely, I'll sit down and watch that. Engagement score, Josh?
I'm going to go 3.5. I think with this one, it's so warm and fuzzy in its aesthetic and because of when it came out, that sort of style, that I wouldn't turn it off. I'm not going to turn it off. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be watching all of it. That might come from me personally knowing it inside out so well that I almost don't need to. But I kind of feel like for people watching it, they might throw it on, but then they can just nip away to make a cup of tea halfway through, and they might, you know, be on their phone or doing different things. So yeah, 3.5.
Becky?
I'm going to go 4.5 because on this rewatch, I was really pleasantly surprised by that runtime, as I say. And I think what I hadn't maybe given it credit for in the past is how like propulsive the story is. Like it really doesn't like rest on its laurels. It really kind of like pushes you through the story. Even the kind of subplot with the bigger boys, you know, Kiefer Sutherland and his gang, that is all
I had a bunch of assholes.
towards them kind of sort of going towards their trip towards the body as well, which then adds this kind of level of like tension because all of a sudden there's like a time limit
clock,
on these boys finding the body. So yeah, I think 4.5. I think it really hooked me in this watch, so it's good.
Helen?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 4 for, that same kind of like warm and fuzziness in that, you know, you don't have to be 100% engaged, but like its ability to tell this kind of story in under 90 minutes is so worth celebrating that maybe filmmakers of today should revisit Stand By Me to understand how to tell a compelling story in under 90 minutes. So yeah, a nice warm and fuzzy 4.
And I'm going to go a bit higher, 4.5. Maybe because I haven't seen it so often recently, and maybe I gave it a repeat viewing score of 5, but that's more for the fact, I will want to watch it again, but I don't think I will watch it often. And I think that distance helps the propulsive nature of the rewatch. That gives an overall score of 4.42500. I just did a quick check on looking on our website, because if you go to our website, guys, on the main menu, there's a button that says scoreboard. You can see all of the films we've released, and you can arrange them in score order. And whenever we get to kind of a high score, I like to kind of have a look and see where we're at. And this places it, I'm not going to count now, but it places it right there with, right below Clueless and above Falling Down.
What a triple bill that would be.
It's a strong sandwich.
Yeah.
Yes.
Clueless and Shaun of the Dead and Clueless on the same points as 4.42. No, 4.425. No, it's the same. It's the same as Clueless and Shaun of the Dead.
Perfect. Great trilogy.
Yeah, strong.
Strong score.
It is, definitely.
All three movies are serving body.
Very good.
Thank you so much, guys. Can you please tell us where we can find you online, and we'll say goodbye to the listeners.
Yeah, you can find me at Joshua Tonks on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And then you can check out my film, The Latent Image, on Amazon Prime. You can get it on DVD if you like, and also through the streaming service Deku.
Awesome.
And you can find me on social media at Bunny Darke. So that's BUNNYDARKE. You can also find my podcast, Don't Point That Horror at Me, at Point Horror Pod, and mine and Josh's podcast, what is it? Eerie Indiana Pod? Evolution Pod. My God. I've got my screening head on. I've started quoting other people's podcasts. Mike should be thanking me. Yeah, so Eerie Indiana Pod, if you want to listen to us talking about fantastic 90s kids shows. Yeah, and I post everything that I'm doing up on my socials, so you can find me there.
Awesome. Guys, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to revisit Stand By Me and talk about it with you guys.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Rockwood Audio's editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.